"You want to mate with me?" the mini-alien said, until the floor plating of the derelict freighter groaned and Jax's boot slipped on a patch of leaking coolant. He landed hard on his ass, his pulse rifle skittering just out of reach. The creature in front of him didn't even flinch. She was, to be fair, a work of art if you were into the whole exotic but deadly thing. Skin the color of a turquoise nebula, long bone-white hair that fell over one shoulder, and eyes like molten gold. But she was also tiny, maybe 5 feet tall if she stretched. Her challenge, delivered in a voice that was somehow both a melodic chime and a commander's bark, was so fucking absurd he almost laughed. Almost. The wicked-looking vibro blade humming in her grip stopped the humor dead in his throat. "I think you've got a translation error, sweetheart," Jax grunted, pushing himself up on his elbows. His gear rattled, a sad metallic sigh. "The word you're looking for is kill. You want to kill me. For the record, I'm not a fan of that idea either." She took a step closer, her movements impossibly fluid. The tight-fitting dark gray armor she wore did nothing to hide the lean muscle beneath. "There is no error, human. You have trespassed on my claiming ground. The law of the Kalan is clear. You will prove your strength in the ritual of union, or you will fertilize this rust hulk with your blood. Mate with me, or die." Jax stared. His brain, usually a rapid-fire machine of snark and survival odds, just buffered. "You're serious." He glanced at her blade, then back at her tiny, determined face. "Look, I'm flattered, I really am. But I've got a no-dying policy, and frankly, my schedule for getting ritually humped by a pocket-sized warrior princess is a little full right now." He made a slow, deliberate move for his rifle. Her boot slammed down on his wrist. The impact was shockingly powerful, sending a spike of agony up his arm. Bones screamed in protest. "Fuck," he hissed, his hand going numb. "You are strong," she said, her golden eyes narrowing as she studied his pained reaction. It wasn't a compliment, it was an assessment, like a butcher checking the quality of a cut of meat. "You smell of ozone, sweat, and desperation, a worthy scent for a potential sire." She tilted her head. "But your mouth noises are weak. A sign of fear. It's called sarcasm, you pint-sized psycho. It's what we do when we're about to be murdered or propositioned by aliens. It's a 50-50 shot which one this is." He flexed his pinned hand, testing her strength. It was like trying to move a hydraulic press. Unyielding. He was a scavenger, not a soldier. He survived by being smarter and faster, not stronger. Right now, he was failing on all 3 counts. He'd been stripping a C-grade transport for its navigation core when she'd emerged from a maintenance shaft like a ghost. "The ritual is a combat," she explained, her tone clipped, as if giving a briefing. "A dance of dominance. We will fight. Your stamina, your cunning, your will to survive. They will be tested. If you best me, you are free to go. If I best you..." She left the threat hanging in the recycled air, a smirk playing on her lips. "Then the union is sealed. Your life is forfeit to my lineage. Let me get this straight," Jax said, his mind finally catching up, spinning possibilities. "I win, I walk. You win, you... What? Ride me like a prize-winning steed into the sunset?" Her smirk widened, showing teeth that were just a little too sharp. "The riding is the culmination, human. It is how my victory is marked upon you, how your strength is claimed." She leaned down, her face inches from his, the scent of her like ozone and some strange spicy flower. "Do you accept the challenge, or do you choose the quick death?" Jax looked at her boot on his wrist, the vibro blade humming a deadly tune, and the sheer, insane confidence in her eyes. Quick death was tidy, but Jax had never been a tidy man. His life was a mess of bad deals and worse luck, and he'd clawed his way out of every single one. This was just another bad deal. A really, really weird one. "Fine," he spat, the word tasting like rust and defeat. "Fuck it, let's dance." A slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. "But if I win, I'm keeping that knife." Her golden eyes flashed with something that looked a lot like pleasure. "If you win," she purred, lifting her boot from his wrist, "you will have earned it." She stepped back, giving him room to rise, her blade held in a low, ready guard. "The ritual begins now." Jax scrambled to his feet, snatching his rifle. He checked the charge. Almost full. Good. He wasn't going to try and out-muscle her. He was going to use this crumbling metal tomb to his advantage. The fight wasn't in a ring. It was here, in the guts of the derelict Stardust Drifter, his territory. He backed away down the corridor, the rifle feeling solid and reassuring in his hands. "All right, Tinkerbell. You wanted to dance? Let's see your moves." The fight was on. A chaotic ballet of survival and seduction in the heart of a dead ship. It was the stupidest thing he'd ever done. And in a life full of stupid things, that was saying something. He just hoped he was a better dancer than he was a talker, because his mouth had already dug his grave. Now he just had to avoid falling into it. The small alien warrior, Zira, as he'd later learn her name was, didn't charge. She flowed. One moment she was 10 meters down the corridor. The next she was a turquoise blur closing the distance. Her vibro blade a silver streak cutting the dim light. Jax fired. Not at her, but at the conduit housing above her head. The shot was perfect. A shower of corroded panels and sparking wires rained down, forcing her to leap back, her advance broken. "Rule 1 of fighting a scavenger," he yelled, already retreating around a corner. "He always knows where the junk is." He didn't wait for a reply. He sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, his heavy boots echoing on the grated floor. This ship was his turf. He'd spent 3 days mapping it, learning its groans and sighs, its weak points and hidden passages. She might be stronger and faster, but he had the home field advantage. He ducked into a mess hall, the tables and chairs bolted to the floor, a metal maze. He vaulted over a table, kicking a loose chair into her path as she entered. She sidestepped it with contemptuous ease, her golden eyes scanning the room, locking onto him instantly. "You fight like a cornered rust rat," she called out, her voice calm, analytical. "All scurrying and pointless noise. And you talk like you're trying to compensate for something," he shot back, squeezing off another round. This one was aimed at the emergency fire suppression system. A thick, foul-smelling foam erupted from the ceiling vents, flooding the room in seconds. It wasn't dangerous, just disorienting and slick as hell. He was already moving, climbing onto the tables, using them as stepping stones toward the far exit. He heard her curse in her own tongue, a string of harsh guttural clicks. It was the first sign of frustration she'd shown, and it gave him a savage thrill. He glanced back and saw her, covered in the white foam, her turquoise skin looking pale, her white hair plastered to her skull. She looked furious, and she was fast. She wasn't bothering with the tables. She was running along the wall, her boots apparently finding purchase where there should be none. Grav tech in her soles. Shit, that was high-grade military hardware. This girl wasn't just some tribal warrior. She was elite. "That was a clever trick," she said, her voice dangerously low as she dropped from the wall, landing silently behind him and cutting off his exit. "But the ritual demands endurance, not just tricks." She lunged, not with her blade, but with her hands. He tried to bring his rifle to bear, but she was too close. She slammed into him, and the impact knocked the wind from his lungs. They went down in a tangle of limbs on the foam-slicked floor. The rifle slid away. This was what she wanted. Close quarters, a true test of strength. Her body was a coil of pure power. Despite her size, she felt heavier, denser than a human. He struggled, trying to throw her off, but it was like wrestling with a piece of machinery. Her grip was iron. They rolled, slipping and sliding in the chemical foam, each vying for dominance. He could feel the heat of her body, the frantic, powerful beat of her heart against his chest. Her face was inches from his, her golden eyes blazing with a predatory light. This wasn't just a fight, it was an evaluation. Every muscle he tensed, every grunt of effort, every desperate move was being catalogued, judged. He managed to get a hand free and shoved it against her face, his thumb pressing against her jawline. "Get the hell off me," he snarled. Instead of recoiling, she bit him, not a savage, tearing bite, but a sharp, definitive pressure on the fleshy part of his palm. He yelped in surprise more than pain, snatching his hand back. A perfect set of teeth marks were indented in his skin. "You bit me! What the fuck is wrong with you?" "Tasting your fear," she breathed, her voice husky. "It is potent." The foam was everywhere, in his hair, his ears, its chemical tang filling his nostrils along with her strange floral scent. The fight had become something else. It was raw, intimate. He could feel the soft contours of her breasts pressed against his ribs, the lean strength of her thighs locked around his. A primal part of his brain, the stupid lizard part that only cared about survival and propagation, stirred. He ruthlessly crushed it. This was not the time. This was not the girl. He used her surprise to his advantage, bucking his hips and managing to reverse their positions. Now he was on top, pinning her wrists to the floor beside her head. Her expression didn't change. No fear, no panic, just that same intense, analytical stare. It was unnerving. "Had enough yet?" he panted, his lungs burning. "The dance is not over," she said, her voice perfectly even. "This is a new step. I am assessing your dominance. So far it is adequate." She arched her back, a subtle, powerful movement that nearly broke his hold. He had to put all his weight into holding her down. Below them, a deep groan echoed through the ship's structure. A sound he recognized. A main support girder giving way. They had maybe a minute before this entire section collapsed. "Adequate?" he gritted out. "Lady, I'm pinning you. In most cultures, that's called winning." "In mine," she whispered, her golden eyes gleaming in the dim light. "It's called foreplay." The girder groaned again, louder this time. The floor beneath them shuddered violently. "Shit," Jax breathed. "We have to move. Now." Her expression didn't change, but he felt a flicker of something in her gaze. Agreement. The ritual was important, but survival came first. Or perhaps for her, they were one and the same. The groan of tortured metal became a deafening shriek. Jax didn't hesitate. He grabbed her arm, hauling her to her feet. "This way," he yelled over the noise, dragging her toward a narrow maintenance conduit he'd spotted earlier. It was their only shot. She didn't resist, her smaller form keeping pace with his easily. The floor behind them buckled, collapsing into the deck below with a cataclysmic roar of tearing metal. Dust and darkness swallowed the mess hall. He shoved her into the conduit, a tight metal tube barely wide enough for one person, and scrambled in after her, pulling the heavy hatch closed just as the corridor outside pancaked. The darkness was absolute. The silence after the chaos was profound. Jax's heart hammered against his ribs. He could hear her breathing, a steady, controlled rhythm right next to his ear. They were pressed together from shoulder to knee, the cold metal of the tube a stark contrast to the radiating heat of her body. "Well," he said, his voice raspy with dust, "this is cozy." She didn't answer immediately. He could feel the tension in her, a tightly wound spring of controlled violence. The tight space amplified everything. The smell of the fire-suppressant foam, the scent of her skin, the shared, ragged breaths. "The ritual is paused," she stated finally, her voice a low vibration against his side. "Survival takes precedence. Glad we agree on something," Jax muttered. He tried to shift, to create even a millimeter of space, but it was impossible. His arm was wedged against her chest, his leg tangled with hers. He was acutely aware of the vibroblade sheathed at her hip, its hilt digging into his thigh. He was also aware of the soft curve of her breast pressed against his bicep. The lizard part of his brain was back, and this time it was throwing a fucking parade. He focused on the more immediate problem. "How's your suit's life support?" "Functional. 8 hours of recycled air. Yours?" "Scavenged. Maybe 2 if I'm lucky and don't hyperventilate thinking about being buried alive with a homicidal alien pixie." He felt her shift, a subtle movement in the dark. "My name is Zira, of the Kalen Ash clan. I am not a pixie." There was a new edge to her voice. Not anger, but something deeper. A raw nerve. "My apologies," Jax said, his sarcasm dialed back for once. "Jax. Just Jax. No clan, no fancy last name." He could feel a slight tremor running through her body. She was either cold or something else. In the pitch black, trapped deep within a dying starship, the warrior persona seemed to be cracking, just a little. He saw an opening, not for escape, but for understanding. "That blade you carry," he said, his voice quiet. "It's a bondmark blade, isn't it? I've seen etchings of them on old colony worlds. Forged from the ship of a fallen mate." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. He thought maybe he'd pushed too far. Then her voice came, stripped of its command, thin and sharp as broken glass. "You are knowledgeable for a scavenger. I scavenge information too. It's lighter than lugging around power converters." He felt for that nerve again, gently. The law is specific. The blade of a dead mate must be used to claim a new one, or the warrior's line is considered cursed. Ended. He felt her flinch. A small, almost imperceptible movement. But in this claustrophobic space, it was a seismic event. She was following a brutal, unforgiving tradition. This wasn't about ego or lust. It was about desperation, about honor. He suddenly saw the fight in a new light. It wasn't a hunt. It was a prayer. A violent, desperate prayer. And he was the unwilling answer. So this whole mate or die thing, he murmured more to himself than to her. It's not just for me, it's for you too. Her silence was all the confirmation he needed. They were both trapped. She by her culture, he by his bad luck. And right now they were trapped together in a metal coffin, waiting for the air to run out. The tension had shifted from violent to something far more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. The darkness pressed in, a physical weight. Jax could feel the vibrations of the ship's death throes through the metal tube. Every groan was a reminder of their tomb. So, he said, breaking the silence, your first mate, he'd die in a ritual like this one? It was a shitty question, but he needed to keep her talking, keep his own mind off the fact that his heir was finite. He died saving his clan from a sandworm on Cygnus X1. Zyra's voice was flat, devoid of emotion which somehow made it heavier. He was strong, honorable. His death was worthy. The unspoken words hung between them. And now I'm stuck trying to claim a smart-mouthed human scavenger to live up to his memory. Sounds like a tough act to follow, Jax admitted. My last serious relationship ended because I forgot to water her plants. He felt a strange compulsion, to be honest. Maybe it was the lack of oxygen. Maybe it was the sheer intimacy of the situation. She said I was emotionally unavailable and smelled vaguely of burnt wiring. A sound escaped Zira's lips. It was a short, sharp puff of air. A laugh? It was too jagged for a laugh, but it wasn't a sob either. Your former mate sounds demanding. You have no idea. He tried to shift his weight, and his hip ground against hers. A jolt, electric and unwanted, shot through him. Look, Zyra, if we get out of this, I'm not your guy. I'm not mate material. I steal things for a living. I'm unreliable. I'm a mess. The ritual does not judge your profession. It judges your essence, your will, your fire, she countered, her voice regaining some of its earlier conviction. So far, your fire burns bright, even if it is fueled by foolishness. Hey, my foolishness has kept me alive for 32 years. Don't knock it. He felt her move again, a deliberate shift this time. Her hand found his arm in the dark. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, her fingers tracing the outline of his bicep. Your body is dense, strong. Not like Kaelin males who are bred for speed but powerful. Her assessment was clinical, but the touch was not. It sent a shiver down his spine. Yeah, well, hauling scrap builds character. And shoulder muscles. He tried to keep his tone light, but his throat was dry. This was getting weird, dangerously weird. Seriously though, this whole thing is a bad idea, just let me go. I'll give you the nav core, my ship, everything. A clean break. The ritual cannot be broken once begun, she stated. Only completed or failed. Failure, he knew, meant her death or disgrace. He was beginning to understand that letting him go wasn't an option for her. He was her last, desperate gamble. His life for her honor. He let out a long, slow breath. This is so fucked up. It is the way. Yeah, well, your way sucks. It's barbaric. It is what ensures the strength of our line, that the weak are culled and only the powerful pass on their blood. Her voice flared with sudden, fierce heat. You humans, you mate for comfort, for temporary amusement. You create weakness. My way creates warriors. My way lets you break up without one of you having to go on a homicidal quest for a replacement. It's got its perks. He was shouting now, his voice tight with frustration and a growing sense of panic. For fuck's sake, just bite me. The words were out before he could stop them. Sarcasm, his oldest and worst defense mechanism. In the absolute dark, her hand tightened on his arm. She went utterly still. He could feel the change in her, the air itself seeming to crackle. What did you say? She whispered, her voice a low, dangerous hum. It's an expression, he said quickly, realizing his mistake. A human thing. It means leave me alone or go to hell. It's not a literal invitation. Evite me, she repeated slowly, tasting the words. An invitation to mark, to show dominance, to claim. No, that's the opposite of what it means. It's defiance. But he could feel her moving, twisting in the impossibly tight space. Her face was suddenly next to his, her breath hot on his neck. The ritual has many stages, human. Combat, pursuit, proximity. Her lips brushed the skin just below his ear, and his entire body went rigid. And submission, she murmured. Your words, they are a surrender, an offering. You have invited the mark. I really haven't, he croaked, but his protest was weak. A strange, terrifying heat was pooling in his gut. The line between fight and flirtation, between terror and arousal had been atomized. Her teeth grazed his jawline, a feather-light predatory touch. The ritual, she breathed against his skin, progresses. The world outside the metal tube ceased to exist. There was only the darkness, their shared breath, and the impending, terrifying certainty of her bite. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the darkness. Not the groan of the ship, but something sharp, electronic. The crackle of a comms unit. A voice, filtered and distorted, echoed faintly from the collapsed corridor outside. No life signs in the mess. Sector is unstable. Move to the command deck. The target is female, Kaylin Ashclan, exiled. The elders want her silenced before she can claim an outworlder and pollute the line. Lethal force authorized. Jax went cold. Zyra went rigid against him, her teeth frozen just above the skin of his neck. Mercenaries, she hissed, the word a venomous puff of air. My clan's elders. Pollute the line, Jax whispered back, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. They're not just trying to stop you. They sent people to kill you, and anyone with you. He was no longer just an unwilling participant in a ritual. He was collateral damage in a political assassination. His already shitty day had just found a whole new basement level of awful. They cannot abide the thought of a bond outside their control, she said, her voice tight with a cold fury he hadn't heard before. My first mate was from a rival clan. Our union was a threat. His death was convenient for them. They declared my line cursed to isolate me. She pulled back from him, the intimate moment shattered, replaced by the grim reality of survival. Now they hunt me to finish the job. Great. Just great. Jax's mind raced. They were trapped, boxed in. The mercs were heading for the command deck, which meant they were methodically clearing the ship. They'd find this collapsed section eventually. They'd find the conduit. We need to move, he said, the urgency sharp and clear. We need to get ahead of them. Out? How? This conduit should lead to the primary engineering shaft. From there, we can get to the lower levels. The reactor room. It's shielded. They won't be able to scan for us in there. It was a long shot. The ship was unstable, but it was better than waiting here to be found. You know this wreck well, she noted, a grudging respect in her tone. It's my job. He braced his hands against the wall of the tube. I'm going to try to push the hatch. It's probably jammed. On 3, we both shove. Ready? Ready! 1, 2, 3! They threw their combined weight against the hatch. It groaned, metal scraping on warped metal, but didn't budge. Again, he grunted. They shoved again. A sliver of light appeared as the hatch moved a bare centimeter. Hope, fragile and thin, cut through the darkness. They shoved a third time, groaning with the effort, muscles straining. The hatch popped open with a screech, dumping them unceremoniously onto the grated floor of a dark, vertical shaft. They were in the engineering access corridor. Emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows. Below them, the shaft plunged into darkness. Above, it climbed into the skeletal superstructure of the ship. The reactor is down, Jax said, panting as he got to his feet. He pointed to a series of maintenance ladders descending into the gloom. That's our best bet. Zyra was already scanning their surroundings, her golden eyes piercing the shadows. Her whole demeanor had changed. The ritual was forgotten, replaced by the focused lethality of a hunted soldier. They will check the shafts. Not if we're fast. He started for the ladder, but she grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Wait. She looked at him, her gaze intense. "If we are found, you must run. This is my fight." Jack stared at her. An hour ago, he would have taken that offer and sprinted without looking back. But something had shifted in that dark tube. He'd heard the truth in her voice, the desperation of a woman backed into an impossible corner by her own people. He was a part of this now, whether he liked it or not. The mercs weren't going to ask questions. They'd see a human with an exiled alien and start shooting. "Yeah, not happening," he said, his voice firm. "They called me a pollutant. Louis, I'm taking that personally. Besides, you still owe me a dance." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. For the first time, she looked at him not as a target or a ritual component, but as an ally. "You are a very foolish human, Jax. Told you. It's my defining characteristic." He gave her a grim smile. "Now let's go. We're burning air and daylight." Metaphorically. As they started down the ladder, the crackle of the merc's comms echoed from above. They were closer than he thought. They were out of time. The descent into the ship's guts was a tense, silent journey. The only sounds were the clang of their boots on the metal rungs and the distant, ominous groans of the dying freighter. The air grew warmer, thick with the smell of coolant and ionized metal. They were nearing the reactor. Jax led the way, his familiarity with the ship's layout their only real asset. He pointed to a heavy blast door set into the wall of the shaft. "There, the primary control room. It's shielded against radiation. Should be shielded against scanners, too." Zira nodded, her vibroblade drawn and held in a reverse grip. Her movements were economical, deadly. She was a predator in her element. Jax, on the other hand, felt his nerves screaming. He was a scavenger, a creature of stealth and opportunity, not direct confrontation. He pried the manual release lever for the blast door. It resisted, rusted and stiff, but finally gave way with a hydraulic hiss. They slipped inside, and he sealed it behind them. The room was a cathedral of dead technology. A massive curved viewing window looked out onto the silent, dormant reactor core, a complex sphere of pipes and conduits. Consoles and monitors formed concentric rings around the room, all of them dark. Emergency lighting cast a blood-red glow over everything. It was claustrophobic and deeply unsettling. "We wait here," Jax said, his voice a low whisper. "Let them pass." Zira didn't relax. She moved to the edge of the viewing window, peering out into the vast, dark chamber housing the core. "They will not pass. They will sweep every level. They are thorough." Her voice was grim. "My clan's executioners are the best. Then we make a stand here," he said, checking the charge on his rifle again. It was a pathetic gesture of comfort. She turned from the window to face him, the red light catching in her golden eyes, making them glow like embers. The tension that had been building between them since the first challenge, the fight, the confinement in the tube, resurfaced, now amplified by the immediate threat of death. "The ritual," she said, her voice dropping to a husky murmur. "It is not complete." Jack stared at her. "Are you fucking kidding me? There are guys with pulse cannons hunting us and you're still on about the ritual?" "The ritual is survival," she insisted, taking a step toward him. "It is a transfer of strength, a forging of a bond. If I am to die, I will die with my line secured. If we are to fight, we will fight as one." "What does that even mean, as one?" he demanded, his back pressing against a cold, dead console. "You will see." She closed the distance between them, her presence filling the small space. The red light painted her turquoise skin in shades of violet and crimson. She was beautiful and terrifying. The combat was the first trial. You proved your cunning. The chase, the second. You proved your endurance. The confinement, the third. You proved your will. Her hand came up not to strike but to cup his jaw. Her thumb traced the line of his stubble. Now comes the final trial. The claiming. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. This was insane. It was suicide. But as he looked into her blazing eyes, he saw not just a warrior's fanaticism, but a profound, desperate plea. She was putting her entire existence, her lineage, her honor, into his hands. It was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing he had ever experienced. "And if I say no," he whispered, his throat tight. "Then we face them as two separate beings," she said simply. "And we will likely die as such." Her fingers tightened on his jaw. But if you allow the union, you will not be just Jax the scavenger, and I will not be Zira, the exile. We will be Kaelin kin, bonded, our strengths multiplied. He could hear the faint, rhythmic thud of mag boots on metal from the corridor outside. They were here. They were out of time. His survival instincts screamed at him to push her away, to find a place to hide, to do what he had always done. But another part of him, a part he didn't recognize, was captivated by the sheer, insane gravity of her offer. To be part of something. To fight for something more than just his own skin. Fuck it, he breathed, the words a surrender. Fuck my life. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her lips. That is the spirit. She leaned in, her lips finding his. The kiss was not gentle. It was a brand. It was a challenge and an acceptance, a declaration of war against the universe. It was raw, demanding, and tasted of ozone, desperation, and a strange alien spice. The fight was back on, but the rules had changed completely. The kiss deepened, a collision of wills in the crimson gloom. Her mouth was hot, demanding, and he met her force with his own. It wasn't a kiss of affection, it was a seal, a contract signed with teeth and tongue. His hands found her waist, pulling her flush against him, while hers tangled in his hair, tilting his head back, asserting her dominance. It was a battle, a continuation of the dance they'd started in the mess hall. But the prize was no longer mere survival. It was surrender. She broke the kiss, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her golden eyes dilated. On the floor, she commanded, her voice a raw rasp. Before the altar of the machine heart, she gestured toward the center of the room, directly in front of the great window overlooking the dormant reactor. The what? He panted, his mind struggling to process the ritualistic language. This place, she said, her hands moving from his hair to the seals on her armor. It is a place of great power, a fitting place to forge a soul. The armor came away in sections with a series of quiet clicks, revealing the sleek dark gray undersuit beneath. She was all lean lines and coiled strength. The sound of a cutting torch slicing through the blast door from the outside spurred them on. A high-pitched whine that vibrated through the floor. They had minutes, at best. Adrenaline and something far more primal surged through Jax. He dropped his rifle and pulled his own shirt over his head, his hands working on the buckle of his belt. The air was thick with a new tension, a desperate feral energy. He met her in the center of the room, and they came together in a tangle of limbs. There was no gentleness, no seduction. It was a raw, frantic coupling driven by the encroaching threat of death. Every touch was a claim, every gasp a prayer. He pushed her back against the cold floor. The positions from their earlier fight reversed. This time, when he pinned her, she didn't resist. She arched up to meet him, her eyes locked on his, challenging and inviting all at once. "Claim me, Jax of Nowhere," she breathed, her ritualistic words a stark contrast to the raw carnality of the moment. "Claim me, and let my ancestors witness your fire." He entered her with a desperate thrust, and she cried out, a sound that was equal parts pain and triumph. It was a brand, a marking. The feeling was electric, overwhelming. It was more than just physical. He felt a jolt, a static shock deep in his mind, as if a switch had been thrown. He could feel her, not just the warmth of her body, but her emotions, her fierce pride, her desperate hope, and a deep, aching grief for the mate she had lost. It flooded him, a torrent of alien feeling that was both terrifying and intoxicating. He moved, their bodies finding a harsh, frantic rhythm that matched the screech of the cutting torch at the door. From her point of view, the world fractured. The physical sensation was secondary to the surge of the bond. She felt his grit, the stubborn, sarcastic core of him that refused to break. She felt his loneliness, a vast, empty space she hadn't anticipated. And she felt his surprising, buried capacity for loyalty. He was not a Kaelin warrior, bred and honed for combat, but his spirit was unyielding. He was worthy. As her climax approached, a biological imperative she couldn't control took over. The bond demanded its seal. It needed a physical mark. As he cried out his release, a guttural sound torn from his throat, she sank her teeth into the muscle of his shoulder. It wasn't a gentle bite like before. It was a possessive, definitive act of ownership. Jax yelled, a sharp cry of pain and shock. A searing heat, far more intense than the bite itself, spread from the wound. He looked down and saw the teeth marks on his shoulder glowing with a faint golden light, the exact color of her eyes. The light pulsed in time with his heartbeat. A living sigil burned into his flesh. The bond was sealed. The cutting torch outside fell silent. A heavy thud announced the blast door was down. Jax scrambled off her, grabbing for his rifle, the new glowing mark on his shoulder throbbing with a strange energy. He could feel Zyra's panic as if it were his own, a cold spike of fear. But beneath it, he also felt her new, fierce resolve. The fallout was immediate and visceral. The glowing mark on Jax's shoulder was more than just a tattoo. It was a live feed. He could feel Zyra's emotions, a cocktail of grim triumph, bone-deep terror, and a shocking, fiercely possessive attachment to him that felt like a brand on his soul. It was a psychic invasion. He felt her adrenaline as his own, her heightened senses bleeding into his. The dark room seemed brighter, the sounds of the mercs in the corridor sharper, more defined. "What the fuck did you do to me?" he hissed, scrambling to his feet and pulling on his pants. He felt exposed, violated, and yet powerful. Zyra rose, her movements fluid and unashamed as she donned her armor. The undersuit clung to her like a second skin. Her golden eyes met his, and for the first time he saw a flicker of uncertainty in them. "I claimed you," she said, her voice strained. "I forged the bond. It is stronger than I anticipated. Stronger. It feels like you hotwired my goddamn brain." He clutched his shoulder, the glowing mark warm against his palm. "I can feel you. All of you. You're everything. And you," she admitted, her gaze dropping for a fraction of a second. "Your cynicism is a shield. Your loneliness is a chasm. It is distracting." Heavy, mag-locked footsteps echoed from the corridor. They were coming. "Distracting? They're about to storm the room and turn us into paste, and you're critiquing my emotional state." "It is relevant," she snapped, her warrior focus returning. She grabbed her vibro blade, its hum a comforting, deadly sound. "The bond works both ways. My senses are yours. My combat instincts are yours. Use them." Jax closed his eyes, forcing himself to focus past the overwhelming flood of her feelings. She was right. He could sense the mercs with a clarity that wasn't his own. 3 of them stacked up outside the door, pulse rifles at the ready. He could almost smell the ozone from their weapon capacitors. He knew their formation, knew where they would enter. It was her knowledge, her experience, flowing into him. "Okay," he breathed, opening his eyes. His gaze was sharp, focused. The fear was still there, but it was now a tool, honed by her warrior's pragmatism. "Okay, I can work with this." He snatched his rifle. "They'll breach on the left, fan out. 2 high, 1 low." Zyra gave him a sharp, approving nod. "I will take the first 2, you take the one who goes low. Aim for the hip joint. Their armor is weaker there." "Got it." There was no more argument, no more sarcasm. They were a single unit, their minds linked by an arcane, alien ritual. The blast door exploded inward, ripped from its hinges by a shaped charge. The 3 mercenaries stormed in, just as he'd known they would. They were huge, clad in heavy black armor, their faces hidden by full coverage helmets. Zyra moved like a turquoise phantom. Before the first merc could even acquire a target, she was on him, her vibro blade slicing through the neck seal of his armor in a spray of red. She used his falling body as a springboard, launching herself at the second merc, her blade plunging into the armpit joint of his weapon arm. He screamed, his rifle clattering to the floor. The third merc dropped low, just as Jax anticipated. He brought his rifle up, the world seeming to slow down. He didn't have to think, he just acted, his movements guided by Zyra's ingrained combat reflexes. He fired. The shot hit the merc square in the hip, shattering the joint. The armored giant went down with a howl, thrashing on the floor. It was over in less than 5 seconds. A brutal, synchronized ballet of death. Jax stood panting, his rifle smoking, the smell of burnt armor and blood thick in the air. He looked at Zyra, who was calmly wiping her blade clean on a dead merc's tunic. Then he looked at the glowing mark on his shoulder. This was real. He had just killed a man with an efficiency that should have been impossible for him. "Holy shit," he whispered. Zira's eyes met his. The bond between them was a palpable thing, a thrumming golden chord in the space between them. He could feel her pride, her relief, and a surge of something else, a fierce, possessive affection that made his stomach clench. "It is not over," she said, her voice low. "That was just the entry team. The leader will be close." As if on cue, a new voice crackled over the dead merc's comms. A calm, cold voice. "Execution team, report. Zira, I know you can hear me. The elders offered you an honorable death. You chose this circus instead. A pity." Jax felt a jolt of pure hatred from Zira. "Kale," she spat, her knuckles white on the hilt of her blade. "The leader. Surrender the human pollutant, and I will grant you a quick end." Kale's voice continued, smooth as poisoned silk. "He is nothing. A footnote in your failed history." Jax felt Zira's rage as if it were his own, but he also felt his own anger rising. A pollutant. A footnote. He'd been called a lot of things in his life. Thief, liar, asshole, but he'd never been dismissed so completely. "Fuck that guy," Jax said, his voice a low growl. He looked at Zira, a reckless, insane plan forming in his mind, a plan born of her tactical genius and his own brand of scavenging bastardry. "I think it's time we properly introduced ourselves." Her plan had been to fight. His was better, it was dirtier, it was theater. "Your laws," Jax said, his mind racing, fueled by the bond that connected them. "The old ways. You said attacking a bonded pair is a taboo." Zira nodded, her eyes narrowed. "A grave sin. It destabilizes the clan structure. Only the most desperate or deranged would dare. And this Kale guy," Jax pressed. "He's an executioner, a zealot for the rules, right? But he's also pragmatic. He's here to do a job, not start a civil war." "He serves the elders," she confirmed, seeing where he was going. Slow, dangerous light began to dawn in her eyes. "He follows their decree. But the law of the bond is older, deeper." "Exactly." Jax grinned, a flash of his old sarcastic self returning, but now it was sharper, honed with her predatory instinct. "So we're not going to fight him. We're going to give him a fucking sermon." He gestured around the room. "The reactor control room. An altar of the machine heart, you called it. Let's give them a ceremony they won't forget." He strode over to the main control console. It was dead, but not fried. He ripped off an access panel, his fingers finding the manual reboot sequence for the emergency lighting and PA system. It was a skill he'd learned looting a dozen ships just like this one. "Get ready to make a speech," he told her over his shoulder. He rerouted the last dregs of power from a backup battery. The main viewing window, which had been dark, flickered to life, bathing the dormant reactor core in a stark, brilliant white light. Then he activated the ship-wide PA system, routing the audio from the control room's internal pickups. Every word they spoke would now echo through the entire freighter. "Kale!" Jax's voice boomed through the ship, amplified and distorted. "You wanted to see the pollutant? Come and get a good look. We're waiting for you." He stood before the lit reactor window, pulling Zira to his side. She went willingly, her hand finding his. The touch was electric, a circuit completing. They could hear footsteps approaching, slower this time, more cautious. A lone figure appeared in the ruined doorway. He was taller than the other mercs, his armor a darker shade of black, etched with silver Kalen script. He held his helmet under his arm, revealing a severe, sharp-featured face and eyes as cold as deep space. This was Kale. He saw the bodies of his men. Then his gaze fell on Jax and Zira, standing defiantly in the light of the reactor. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he saw the glowing golden mark on Jax's shoulder. "By the first ancestors," Kyle breathed, his voice a mix of shock and disgust. "You actually did it. You bonded with that." "Watch your mouth." Jax's voice was dangerously calm. "You're talking about my mate." Zira stepped forward, her voice ringing with ancient authority, the words echoing through the ship's PA. "I am Zira of the Kalen Ash clan, and I claim this man, Jax, as my bonded mate." She raised their joined hands. "The ritual is complete. The union is sealed before this heart of fire. His strength is my strength, his life is my life." She locked eyes with Kale, her gaze unwavering. "To strike at him is to strike at me. To strike at a sealed pair is to defy the great law. You know the price for that, Kale. For you, and for the elders who sent you. Kale's face was a mask of fury and conflict. He had come here to execute an exile. Now he was facing a holy rite. His men were dead, his mission compromised. To attack now would be to commit a sacrilege that could get him and his masters cast out. The political fallout would be catastrophic. The pragmatic soldier in him warred with the fanatical enforcer. Jax pressed the advantage. "The elders lied to you, Kale," he said, his voice resonating with a certainty that came directly from the bond. He could feel Zyra's history, her truth. They didn't tell you her first mate's death was an assassination to break a political alliance, did they? They didn't tell you they declared her line cursed to cover their own crimes. Kyle flinched. The accusation hit its mark. He was a soldier, not a politician. He was here to enforce the law, not to be a pawn in a power game. Doubt, potent and poisonous, bloomed on his face. He looked from the defiant, bonded pair to the bodies of his men. The cost of this mission had suddenly become too high. With a snarl of frustration, he turned away. "This is not over, Zyra," he spat, his voice lacking its earlier conviction. "The elders will hear of this." He stormed away, his heavy boots echoing down the corridor until they faded into silence. Silence descended on the control room. It was over. They were alive. They were alone. Jax let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for his entire life. He looked down at the glowing mark on his shoulder, then at Zyra. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind an unnerving calm and the thrumming, undeniable connection between them. She was no longer just some alien warrior. She was a part of him. "So," he said, his voice raspy. "What now, tiny terror?" Zyra looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw a genuine, unguarded smile touch her lips. The sight did strange things to his heart. Her confidence was back, but it was different now. Not the arrogance of a lone hunter, but the quiet certainty of one half of a whole. "Now, my mate," she said, her hand squeezing his. "Now, we survive." The word hung in the air, no longer a threat or a challenge, but a promise. In the crimson glow of the dead ship, surrounded by the wreckage of their past lives, it felt like the only promise that mattered.